Welcome back to another episode of Be Our Guest here on Musical Theater Radio. I'm your host, as always, Jean-Paul Yovanov. I've said this before. I like talking to performers and creators of musicals, but I love talking to the people behind the scenes. You may not know their names, but they are just as much a part of a production as the people on the stage. Today, we're going to learn more about Cinevative, the nation's leading creative studio specializing in commercial and motion graphics production for the performing arts. Now, I can be very descriptive, but I can't do justice to what I see on their website. It's incredible. But you know who might be able to? The founder of the company. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the show, Mark Ciglar. Mark, hello.
Hello, Jean-Paul. So nice to see you.
It is. It's so nice to meet you. So before we learn about the company and a little bit and everything, I always like to get to know my guests first. So I'd like a 30-second bio of Mark. Who is Mark Ciglar? In 30 seconds.
In 30 seconds. So I'm like a theater kid through and through. I started off like so many of us as an actor, growing up, and did it professionally for a little while, moved into directing theater. And at the same time, I was directing television commercials. And in the television commercials that I was directing, there were a lot of visual effects elements to them that I was really interested in, because there was an aspect of it that felt very much like theater to me, in that anything was possible. If you could imagine it, you could make it. And I thought that there would be a really interesting application to try to merge some of these visual effects ideas in with the performing arts community. And that was what led me to start this company. It allowed me a way to provide commercials and promos for theaters at the beginning of a season before they had anything to film. And that was really the impetus for the whole thing, and what got me to here. And now I get a chance to direct and to creative direct and get my fingers in all different kinds of pies.
That is very cool. Very cool. I'm very interested in all that sort of thing. But were you always into musical theater growing up? Or is that something you discovered a little bit later in life?
The musical theater aspect was a little bit later in life, because when I started in theater, it was like Shakespeare, and it was all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't until I got a little bit older and I started, because I wasn't in the New York area. I was, on the West Coast. And it wasn't until I started getting a little bit older, got to New York, got to see Broadway shows, where I really was captivated by it. And now I'm just a diehard fan.
Did you go to school for all that stuff, or did you?
I did go to a theater school, yeah. So, but again, it was classical theater. It was, all of that sort of thing. So, as a director, as a performer, I never really had a chance to work in the musical side of it. So now on the marketing side, I'm just always so excited to do it.
I'm always curious when you're in school and you decide to go in the direction of theater. Sometimes there's something else that drew you. Is there anything else that you thought of as a career that had nothing to do with theater that you went, maybe?
That's a good question. Boy, it was always art related in some way, shape, or form. I mean, if I wasn't acting, I was painting. It was something to do with the arts. And in some way, I don't think I ever could have imagined my life not surrounding some form of arts or theater or culture.
Okay. Yeah, I've had physicists. Like
Oh,
I've had
yeah.
it's crazy how you go in one direction and then you end up somewhere else. But
Well, all of the sort of the filmmaking side of this, that was really the outlier for me. That was the thing that I had to kind of learn after the fact. There was certainly a lot of technical skills that I had to learn along the way. When I first started, I was essentially a one-man band. It was me and an assistant, and I was hands-on doing everything myself. And so I would be taking classes at night in all of the new software that was available. And this is 20 years ago.
yeah.
But at the heart of it, it was always the idea of, how do I tell a story? The same way that I did as a kid doing theater.
Nice. So let's talk about Cinevative, your company. What was that aha moment that made you want to start that company?
So there was a theater that I had been directing plays for, and I had asked them, would you ever think about running a television commercial? And they said, well, we'd love to, but we can't do it because, we really need the lead time. We really need something to run early. And by the time the show's ready to film, it's too late. And that was my aha moment. That was when I thought, there's something here. If I could use some of these motion graphics, visual effects ideas, if I could take actors and put them in a green screen environment and create a world around them, I could create something in advance. And the thing that was most interesting is when I floated the idea, I had a couple of bites, I had a couple of people that were willing to try it. And the thing that was interesting was that those original promos ended up being more effective for them than just the standard video of the show. For the reason being that when we look at a promo for a show, we're essentially seeing actors standing on a stage. And if you look at a season of promos, you're cutting from one promo where there's actors standing on a stage to another promo where there's actors standing on a stage to another promo, and it's all the same. Their clothes change, the sets change, but the feeling of what it feels like to be in an audience, to really be transported, because one of the things that's so transcendent about theater is that it captures our imaginations, and we're a participant in it. Our imaginations are filling in so much of it, and you don't see that in a video capture.
Yeah.
And once we started going this direction of saying, okay, what if we can make anything? We're not just depicting what's happening on stage, but we're saying, okay, what is the audience feeling here? What are they actually imagining? Where are they being transported? Can we create a visual representation of that experience? And we stopped thinking about showing what's on stage, and we started thinking about reflecting what the audience feels like. And that's when things started to really take off, and when things started to become more effective.
And when did you start the company?
In 2001.
Wow.
So
the technology has definitely changed.
It's definitely changed. Yes, it's definitely changed. And it's quite amazing what can be done now. I mean, truly, if you can imagine it, you can make it.
Because I'm looking on your website, and you said you did the commercials for that theater, but you do more than that. You do video. It says VFX, motion, projections. Tell us a little bit about each one of those things and how they affect the theater.
Absolutely. So, well, we certainly do a lot of stage projections, which is really wonderful because then we get to, to be integrated into the storytelling of the process. A lot of the ideas are the same there. I mean, it really is just finding a way of visually telling a story. Do the projections become another character in this sense? Is it really just an environment, or are we reflecting something that's happening emotionally within a particular character? Are the projections the antagonist in this moment, affecting what's happening to the people on stage? And I love being able to sort of problem solve in that way, figure out what do we need to solve here? What's the missing piece that the projection needs to create? So that's and that's something that we do for not just theater, but we do it for concerts and stadium tours and all kinds of things. So it really is performing arts in its entirety. And then we do full show captures where we will sometimes create a production. We'll help to produce a production that is meant solely for capture on stage. And then sometimes we are turning something that is a live event into a full-length special. Sometimes it's strictly performing arts. Sometimes it's something random. Simone Biles did a tour of Gold Over America, which was the USA gymnastics team doing a stadium tour. We turned that into a full-length special. So there's a lot of different applications for this sort of thing, and ultimately it all comes down to the same idea of visual storytelling. How do we create the experience for somebody sitting in front of a screen that feels the same as sitting there in the audience?
As a director, that's one more thing now we have to put into our think about, because we always think about there's the set designer, there's the lighting designer, and the sound designer, and now there's so much opportunity to do this, visual projections thing. How does that work with the director? Do you work with all the other ones, like the set director and the director, and how does that back and forth go?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's completely integrated. And we want to be very, very careful with video in particular because you never want it to detract. You always want it to add. And video can, if it's not done properly, it can distract, it can take away from that live experience. And people go to the theater because they don't want to see a movie. They want to see a live show, and so we really want to find that balance of, we're just giving you something that you couldn't get otherwise, but it really is additive to that live experience. And so that integrates very much into the scenic design. It integrates into very much into the lighting design. And oftentimes, I mean, we will do projections where we're projecting onto the costumes. So we'll work with the wardrobe designers as well. So it's very collaborative in that sense. And again, I'm always very careful to want to let some of those others take the lead and kind of see how we can, fill in the gaps so that we're really the glue holding things together. We're not trying to create the structure.
Is there a show that you did that you went, wow, that's good? We did some good stuff, that you were blown away by what you did?
There are several that I'm really proud of, and certainly several moments that I'm really proud of. Some of them are musicals, some of them are concerts, some are variety shows. We do a lot with, there's a lot of like cruise ship shows. We do a lot of shows for Royal Caribbean, where we've had a chance to be really experimental and do things that you wouldn't otherwise necessarily get a chance to do. One of those where we were projecting onto costumes was in that scenario. There was one where we had rear projections and then scrims in the front, and then people with projected costumes in the middle, and it was so immersive and so beautiful, and it really felt like you had a chance to see something that you couldn't see in any other environment. And that to me was thrilling.
That's very cool. That's very cool. So what about the VFX motion? Tell us a little bit about that part of it.
So that sort of thing is, so for example, let's say that you have a show. I'll give you an example of a really early one we did, which was a one-person show with William Shatner, where he was going to do a Broadway show, him telling stories about his life. And but there's really nothing to shoot because at this point he hadn't written the stories yet, and it was all we had was William Shatner. So what do you do? So we got him in a green screen studio, and we had him, the whole idea was that it's his world and we all just live in it. And so we had him throwing this big globe around, and the whole thing was done with computer generated imagery. And at one point he's standing on it and he's rolling it. And it gives him an opportunity to play and to use his personality, and for us to tell that story in a way that we couldn't in any real physical way. It gave him a chance to just be in an empty green screen environment, play around. You're throwing the globe around, you're jumping on it, you're doing whatever. And we can paint that world around him. And that to me was a great example of a good use of the talent of the performer and the ability of what the visual effects could do. And so sometimes we're doing it to actually create an environment. We have a spot that we did for Oklahoma at Denver Center that, Oklahoma is the environment is critical. You're in Oklahoma,
Yeah.
you have to see it. And yet the entire thing was green screen. And we have many people looking at that spot and they have no idea that that was all done as a visual effects spot.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Do you see now? I don't know if you can predict into the future, having theaters just that are just green boxes, and maybe we all sit in the theater with our VR headsets on. So we still have live theater, but not live theater. Is that something you guys see yourself doing in 20 years?
It's a good question. I've seen some versions of this,
Mhm.
and the thing that is challenging for that approach is that you're taking some of the artistic choice away from the director, because so much of the director's vision is about where to point the focus of the audience. And as soon as you strip that away, you lose a little of the power of storytelling. And it's not to say that there aren't applications for that, and there aren't new art forms that could take hold and be really fascinating. And I think that will happen. I don't think it's going to replace theater. I mean, theater fundamentally hasn't really changed in hundreds of years. I mean, ultimately, it's still people on a stage, and ultimately, really, that's what moves us the most. And I don't think we're going to lose that anytime soon.
Well, speaking of technological advancements, like you said, you started in 2001. What have you seen change technology wise for you putting your company together and building these things?
Well, I mean, there's two things. One is the ease of use. Um, Being able to find talented designers who have now the technical ability, because before the technical bar was set so high, just to be able to work your way around these programs, you could have really talented designers that just couldn't quite get there on the technical side. Now, if you're a great designer, you can dive in and you can make it happen. And that has democratized a lot of that, which I think is really wonderful. On the other side, things are becoming much more realistic. That sort of plasticky, video game look to a lot of things is starting to go away. And I think that will continue to develop and will continue to have more of an organic look. And I think the more organic things look, the more we allow them to affect ourselves, the more we're moved by them. And I think that will make them just that much more effective.
So I'd like to take to the 2 years we lost because obviously there was no theater for you to do, but because you guys were more on the technical side, was there anything that you were able to come up with because you had that time or you created?
Yeah, it was a fascinating time because there were so many theaters that wanted to find a way of retaining their subscription base, and so we ended up producing a lot of video content for these theaters that they could offer for their subscribers. So we were doing sometimes full show captures, but a lot of times it was really, taking how can we take a reading and produce it as though it were a short film? And we were doing things that I thought were really, really interesting. And it was a different kind of hybrid sort of filmmaking. It wasn't theater, it wasn't really film, it was this thing that fell in between. And I think there was a lot of really interesting things that came out of it. I don't know how much of that will stick around now that we're back into live theater, but I think people are going to find some applications for it along the way. But it was certainly a really interesting journey.
That was as terrible as the pandemic was, and but the stuff that we were able to come out of and create an experiment, because if COVID had never happened, would you have even thought about experimenting with any of this stuff, right?
Absolutely not. You're totally right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it really pushed us. It really pushed us in a great way. And it got us collaborating with people in a way that we hadn't before. I mean, we were um, before the pandemic, I think we were a little bit more on the outside of the production team. We were the vendor on the outside.
Mhm.
And as soon as the audience was gone, we were the only connection to them. And so we were really integrated into that production process in a way that has maintained even through this time.
So any of the things that I didn't mention, I can't remember what we talked about already, but anything else you wanted to let us know about the company, what it does?
I mean, that's the primary focus is really being able to tell the story of a theatrical experience, regardless of what you have to work with. That's really our sort of unique selling proposition, if you will.
Okay.
And I think it's the thing that's been able to sort of set us apart.
What's the process when a theater company comes to you and says, "Hey, I have this show. I want to do XYZ with it." What is that process like?
So I'll start with asking them, what is that audience experience? What are we promising? Because ultimately that's what we're trying to do, is fulfill that promise that the theater is making. And there's a different criteria when it comes to a promo or a commercial than any other kind of advertising. When you look at print advertising, we perceive that as being informational. You could put a quote on a print ad or on an online ad that says it's the funniest show all season, and says the New York Times or whatever the attribute is.
Yeah.
And if we trust that attribution, we will believe it's the funniest show this season. But if you do the same thing in a commercial, we don't actually believe it unless that commercial makes us laugh.
Mm.
And that's the big difference. So we have to somehow deliver on the promise that theater is making on screen. If we're saying this is a moving experience, this is an emotional experience, this is going to make you laugh, we have to actually make the audience feel that in that commercial within that 30 seconds. And that's the big challenge, and the thing that I find so thrilling, because it's the thing that good commercials have done it for many, many years. There was the old Hallmark commercial where people would get so emotional over the kid that comes home for the holidays. And the thing that always fascinated me about those was that you never actually saw the product. They didn't show you a greeting card. They showed you this emotional connection between people, and it made you want to reach out to your family. It drove the next action because of the emotional response that they created. And that's the thing that I try to do in my commercials with theater. Is there's a promise that we're making, there's a place that we're going to transport you, and if we can give you a taste of that within this 30 seconds, you'll know that you'll get that when you get to the theater.
Nice. Some examples of some of the shows you've done that we can see commercials for.
Boy, it's a long list. I mean, most of the shows.
Ones that you really love, not that they're the best, but you kind of had such a good time, or they were experimental, you had some fun with.
Yeah, there's a lot of, the trajectory that we usually take is that we work with most of the major regional theaters in the country. And what happens is they will be launching pads for Broadway. So when a new musical starts, we'll essentially create the commercial in that regional environment. Then it will go to Broadway, and then oftentimes we will rework with a different campaign, oftentimes with a different agency in the Broadway production. Then it will go to a touring company, and then we'll work with that touring company and redo it. And then it ends up back in these performing arts centers. And so it's this sort of ecosystem of theater that works its way around. So we end up hitting most of the shows that go through those. So sometimes we'll start with it in regional, and it'll go to somebody else when it goes to Broadway, and then it'll come back to us on a tour. But we've got, most of the shows that are out there now, we've had our fingers in somehow. So we're working on Moulin Rouge right now. We've worked on Hadestown. We're working, it's all of the new shows that are out there. In one form or another, will come either start with us regionally, or will make its way back to us.
It's interesting. You get to see it at the beginning, the middle, and then you get to watch it change, and then it comes back to where it started.
Absolutely. Yeah. Which is a fascinating trajectory. And particularly with a show, like Hadestown, that is so different now on tour than it was on Broadway in the most beautiful way. It is fascinating to watch the evolution of something like that. And then, or even some of the smaller shows that, they start and you think, I don't know where this is going to go. It's, and then they completely rework it and it just turns into this beautiful thing. So it's thrilling to watch.
That is very cool. So, how can we learn more about your company? Where can we go and that sort of thing?
Well, certainly you can go to cinevative.com, cinevative.com, and you can check out our work there. And people can always drop me an email at M-A-R-K, at cinevative.com. I'm always available. And yeah, I would love to hear from you.
That's awesome. Thank you, Mark. I can't remember where I saw Cinevative. Was it at an event, or maybe I just saw you at a?
It may have been at the NAMT conference.
Might have been. I can't remember
Yeah.
anymore. Like after it starts blurring. But I'm glad I got to know more about you and the company and what you do. So thank you so much for coming on and talking to us today.
Thank you. It was such a pleasure.
But before we go, I always ask 3 questions of my guests. Now, there's no right or wrong answer, but the audience is judgy and they have opinions. As you know, theater people have opinions. So let's start out with an easy one. Question 1: what creator or team within musical theaters had a great influence on you? It could be a composer, lyricist, director, producer, actor, stage manager, designer. It could be somebody famous or not famous. Is there somebody who's had a good effect on you and what you've done?
I mean, I probably have to say Stephen Schwartz, because the first actual Broadway show that I ever saw was not on Broadway. It was the filmed version of Pippin. And I was just transfixed. I thought that was the most amazing thing I'd ever seen. Yeah, so I'd go with Stephen Schwartz.
Good. You can't go wrong with Stephen Schwartz. That's a good answer. 1 point. So question number 2. Now, you said you were in commercials.
Yes.
What jingle from the commercial world do you think is one of your favorites that would fit maybe into musical theater?
Ooh, a jingle. Oh man, you made
There's so many good ones over the years.
What's that?
There's so many good ones over the years.
There are. It's so funny. I go back to I'm probably one of the older people on your listener list here, but I remember the old David Naughton "I'm a Pepper."
Okay.
When he would dance through the streets and do those musical numbers. Yeah.
That's a great song. I know they don't really write as many jingles now for commercials.
No, certainly not big splashy musical numbers like that.
No, but well, I guess with Netflix and all those things, no one who watches commercials anymore. I guess for the Super Bowl is the only time we're really.
Yeah, true.
So good job getting out in 2001 and getting into the theater world, doing them there. You were ahead of your time. You knew what was going to happen. So correct answer, by the way.
Question number 2. Oh,
question number 3: food in the theater or cell phones in the theater? Which is worse?
Ooh, I got to go with cell phones. It just, I got to go with cell phones in the theater worse. If people can somehow eat quietly, but you can't hide the light from that phone.
So true. I would have accepted both are terrible.
So good. Okay. Yeah. All right.
So yes. So another point. Congratulations. 3 out of 3.
Thank you.
The points don't count because I got nothing to give you. So there's no prizes.
All right.
But again, Mark, thank you so much for coming on and telling me a little bit about yourself, Cinevative, and people can find you also. We're going to put you on our musical theater resources page on the website so Wonderful. People can find you very easily in the future as well. So
fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
No problem. All right. We were just speaking with Mark Ciglar, the founder of Cinevative. Tune in next week as we'll have another guest or guests talk about their life, love, and passion. That is musical theater. I am your host, as always, Jean-Paul Jovanov. And until next time, I'll see you when I see you.